There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when you realize you were never the problem. You were the calm in their storm, the clarity in their confusion, the steady voice when everything else was noise. But they didn't see it. Or maybe they saw it and couldn't handle it. Some people aren't ready for the kind of soul that doesn't play games, doesn't wear masks, doesn't flinch in the face of truth. And so they let you go, not because you weren't enough, but because you were more than they were prepared to receive. Let that truth settle where it belongs, not on your shoulders but on theirs, because in the end they didn't just lose a person, they lost a good soul, and that's on them. You were light in a room that had grown too comfortable in the dark. They didn't push you away because you were flawed. They didn't turn their backs because you failed them. No, what unsettled them was how deeply you saw, how gently you loved, how patiently you waited in places most would have walked away from long ago. You brought light, quiet, steady, unwavering light, into places that had grown too used to shadows. And at first they welcomed it, they warmed themselves in it, but in time that same light began to reveal what they weren't ready to see, the cracks in their story, the masks they wore, the truths they'd buried deep. And when that happened, it wasn't gratitude that followed. It was distance, cold, silent distance, not because your presence harmed them, but because your truth reminded them of everything they weren't ready to confront. People grow comfortable in the dark. It hides their contradictions. It shields them from the weight of accountability. And when someone like you enters, with honesty in your eyes, loyalty in your heart, and no appetite for mind games, it disturbs the false peace they've built. You didn't ask for too much. You simply showed up with something real, and real, in a world so used to performance, feels like confrontation. You weren't trying to fix them. You were simply being you, steady, kind, present. But even that was too loud for souls still trying to hide from their own echoes. It's a quiet kind of betrayal, isn't it? To be punished for the very qualities that made you rare. To be discarded not for what you did, but for who you are. But let's be clear, that is not your shame to carry. That is not a burden for your heart. That's the weight of their choices pressing down on their own conscience. You see, when someone loses a good soul, not a perfect one, but a genuine one, they don't walk away clean. They carry something with them, a silence that follows them, a question that returns late at night. What if I had valued what I had before it slipped away? You didn't just brighten their world. You brought stability. You brought grounding. You gave them a chance to step into something better, something deeper, and they chose the shadows instead. But the irony is, they'll remember the light. They'll remember how it felt to be seen without judgment, to be held without conditions, to be forgiven without needing to beg. And they'll spend years searching for that feeling in people who only reflect, never radiate. They will seek you in places that can't recreate you. So hold your head high. Not everyone can handle the weight of real love, real loyalty, real presence. That's not your failure. That's their unpreparedness. And when the light leaves a dark room, it doesn't argue. It doesn't beg to stay. It simply departs and lets the darkness explain itself. Your value wasn't diminished. It was simply wasted on the unready. There is a painful truth that few are willing to admit. Not everyone is ready for a heart like yours. Not everyone is prepared to receive the quiet strength, the deep loyalty, or the unwavering kindness you brought into their lives. And when people aren't ready for something rare, they don't honor it, they mishandle it, they confuse simplicity for lack of depth, kindness for naivety, presence for dependence. But make no mistake, none of that speaks to your worth. Your value wasn't lost, it wasn't diminished. It was simply wasted on those who didn't know how to hold it. Like handing a masterpiece to someone who only sees scribbles, or giving gold to someone still content with rust. Your soul was placed in the hands of the unprepared, and they let it slip through their fingers without even realizing what they had. You gave when you didn't have to. You listened when they didn't speak. You stood by their side during storms they never even thanked you for surviving. and still they found a way to convince themselves that you were somehow too much, too intense, too present. But the truth is, they weren't equipped. For someone who didn't play emotional games, who didn't pull away when things got difficult. They wanted noise, and you were silence. They wanted control, and you offered trust. They wanted drama, and you brought peace. And instead of growing into what you offered, they turned their backs, thinking they were walking towards something better, but what they walked away from was irreplaceable. There's a kind of sorrow in realizing that your greatest gifts were wasted on the wrong stage, that your honesty was met with suspicion, your effort met with indifference, and your patience mistaken for weakness. But that sorrow isn't yours to hold forever. It's theirs, because one day they will stand face to face with someone who gives them the same treatment they gave you, someone who shows them what indifference really feels like. And in that moment, they'll remember the way your presence felt like peace, the way your words felt like home, the way your love required nothing but truth. And you'll have already moved on, not in bitterness, not in revenge, but in quiet wisdom, because good souls don't beg to be seen. They don't shrink to fit someone's comfort zone. They rise, they grow, they outgrow. You are not defined by those who failed to see you. You are defined by the integrity you kept even when no one was watching, by the dignity with which you walked away when it became clear they didn't know what they were holding. So don't question your worth just because someone didn't recognize it. You weren't too much. You were just too real for people still addicted to the fake. And now that you've walked away, they're left searching for what you gave so freely, hoping to find even a fraction of what they let slip away. But the truth is, they won't, because your value remains intact. It was never theirs to define. Regret is a quiet room, and they're locked inside it now. You didn't leave with noise. You didn't slam doors or burn bridges. You simply stepped back, calmly, silently, finally. And in that silence something began to shift, not in you but in them. The very absence they thought they could handle, they now feel in places they can't escape, because regret doesn't come crashing in like thunder. It creeps in softly. It waits until the world gets quiet. Then it begins to speak. And when it speaks, it doesn't shout. It whispers. It replays your patience, your presence, the countless moments you stayed when others would have walked, the sacrifices you never advertised, the grace you gave without being asked. And now, in the quiet corners of their life, those memories return like shadows, uninvited but impossible to ignore. You see, when someone loses a good soul, the consequences are not loud or dramatic. They're internal, emotional, inescapable. It's the sound of footsteps not heard anymore. It's the absence of your voice in the chaos. It's the realization that what they thought was replaceable was actually rare beyond measure. They didn't just lose a companion, they lost a sanctuary, a safe space, a person who asked for nothing but gave everything, and now they sit in rooms that echo, not with laughter or warmth, but with what-ifs and if-onlys. That is the prison of regret. No bars, no locks, but no exit either. They might pretend to be fine. They might smile for the world, laugh at all the right times, post their carefully filtered highlights. But deep down, they know something sacred slipped through their hands. They feel it when no one's watching, when the crowd is gone, when the mask comes off. That's when your absence speaks loudest, because you didn't just leave a space. They lost a standard, a mirror that reflected back the truth. A presence that didn't demand perfection, but always deserved honesty. And the most haunting part of it all, you never asked for more than the bare minimum. Respect, effort, truth, not luxury, not perfection, just presence. Just consistency, and still it was too much for them. Not because you asked too much, but because they offered too little. And now, every future relationship they enter will carry the silent comparison. Every smile they see will fall short of yours. Every moment of kindness will feel shallow, because they'll remember how deep yours used to go. And they'll realize, too late, that you were the exception, not the rule. But you are free now. You carry no malice, no bitterness, just clarity. You've seen what happens when a good soul stays too long in places where it isn't valued. You've learned the cost of patience in the wrong hands. And you've chosen peace over punishment. That is your power. You didn't destroy them. You left them with themselves. And sometimes that's the loudest consequence of all. So let the silence speak. Let the distance echo. You don't have to prove anything. Their regret will do all the talking now. Some lessons come wrapped in loss. There are lessons in life that arrive not with explanations, but with endings. Some people only understand what they had once it's gone. And by then, the silence you leave behind becomes their greatest teacher. You were the lesson, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in absence. They didn't recognize your worth when you stood by them, when you listened without interrupting, when you forgave without being asked. They thought your loyalty was endless, your love unconditional, your presence permanent. And so they mishandled you. They tested how far they could push, how little they could give, how much you would endure. But everything has its limit, even a soul as giving as yours. And when that limit was reached, you didn't lash out. You didn't plead. You just walked away. And in that moment, the lesson began. Now they sit with a vacancy they can't explain, a stillness that follows them. Because when someone loses a good soul, it isn't just a person that disappears. It's a kind of peace they never thought they'd miss. It's the way you made chaos feel calm, how your presence softened life's hard edges. They took it all for granted, thinking life would always offer second chances, thinking people like you grow on trees. But they were wrong. Souls like yours don't come often. You were not a background character in their story. You were the turning point they ignored, and now, without even trying, you've become a reminder they can't escape. They will try to move on. They will tell themselves it was for the best. But every now and then, someone will say something in the way you used to. Someone will offer them a fraction of the patience you gave endlessly. And in that moment, they'll flinch, not because of the new person, but because of the ghost of you still echoing in their memory. That's what real loss feels like. Not just the absence of a body, but the aching absence of what that soul once made you feel. And no matter how far they go, how loud their life gets, the lesson will follow them quietly. And what about you? You've grown. You've grieved, yes, but you've also risen. Because being the lesson doesn't make you less whole. It makes you wiser, stronger. You now know what not to tolerate. You now know the cost of staying in places where you're only half seen. You no longer beg to be understood by those who refuse to listen. That is your freedom. You learned your lesson too, not in loss, but in liberation. You didn't lose them. They lost you. And in that loss, they received their education. An education that came at the price of your silence. So let them learn, let them feel, let them remember. You owe no explanation, no return, no warning. Some lessons are best learned the hard way. And losing you was exactly that, a quiet, lifelong reminder of what happens when you take something sacred and treat it like it was ordinary. You keep walking because your soul was never meant to shrink to fit them. There comes a time when you stop asking why they couldn't love you right, why they didn't see your worth, or why they chose to hurt the very person who showed up for them when no one else did. That time is now, because the truth is simple. You were never meant to shrink, twist, or dim yourself just to make others feel comfortable. You weren't born to bend until you broke just so someone else could feel tall beside you. And you certainly weren't made to keep explaining your goodness to people committed to misunderstanding it. You keep walking, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started choosing yourself. You stayed too long in spaces that made you feel small. You tried to fit into molds that were never shaped for you. You bit your tongue, lowered your standards, and called it compromise. But it wasn't. It was self. Betrayal in disguise. You knew it deep down. Every time you made yourself quieter so they wouldn't feel threatened by your truth. Every time you overlooked their carelessness just to keep the peace. It chipped away at something sacred inside you, but no more. You've outgrown those spaces. You've outgrown the version of yourself that settled, that tolerated, that begged for the bare minimum and called it love. People who cannot meet you where you are will always try to pull you back to where they feel safe. They'll say you've changed, they'll say you're cold, but in truth, you've just stopped apologizing for growing. They will call your peace distance and your boundaries pride, but only because they benefited when you had none. Now that you're standing tall, now that you're walking away, not in hate, but in clarity, they don't know how to handle it. But their confusion is not your concern. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them another explanation, another chance, another moment of your time. What you owe is to your own soul, the one that spent too long starving for reciprocity, waiting to be seen, hoping to be understood. Your healing is not about proving anything to them. It's about honoring everything you've survived. Every wound that turned into wisdom, every tear that watered the strength you walk in now. And yes, walking away might feel heavy at first. You'll miss the memories. You'll revisit the what-ifs. But every step you take in your truth will begin to feel lighter. Because the freedom that comes from no longer begging to be chosen is the kind of peace you can't fake. So don't look back, not with anger, not with longing. Look forward, toward the places where your soul can stretch, breathe, and belong. Because in the end, the people who try to contain you, diminish you, or define you, they don't get to keep you. They lost that right the moment they asked you to become less. And you, my friend, were always meant for more. Keep walking.